This episode was not brought to you by Saudi Arabia. Take that, Vince. We may have literally a fraction of your viewers, but at least we have the moral high ground.
Hello, and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader. Seriously, why is it 20 degrees in the daytime in November? That's January weather, Wyoming. Get with the program.
Yes, winter is coming, and unlike Game of Thrones, it actually takes less than 7 seasons to get here. And this also, as tradition, leads to our season finale. Yes, we know there's another month, but that's usually the time we take a break to be with our loved ones.
Because it's Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, so, Merry Christmas if you celebrate that, or just Happy Holidays if you have some other kind of celebration. Well, I don't mind what it is, as long as it doesn't actively involve hurting people, in which case you should stop. Just stop.
And if you celebrate nothing in particular, well, just enjoy your month off of responsibilities. I know I am!
Indeed. But we have a season to close off, so let's begin with this year's final Q&A! This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Okay, our first question comes from Infernity Zero, and it reads, "Oh, f*** me."
Huh, that's an odd question.
No, that was my reaction. What do you think of Bowsette? Why, Internet? Why? If I may quote Odin in that one shot on MVL's channel, why?
It's funny, I'm just sitting here, but I personally don't have that much reaction to it, but I should probably get any audience member who doesn't know what Bowsette is up to speed. Okay, so Nintendo announced that they were going to port Super Mario Bros. Wii U to the Nintendo Switch, which actually makes a lot of sense because as much as I love the Wii U, it sold terribly. So it's no surprise a lot of the great games are being transferred to the Switch, which is actually selling and more people might play. But as part of this port, they're replacing one of the two generic Toads that resemble players 3 and 4 with Toadette, which makes perfect sense. She has the same body as a Toad, she's getting a lot of traction recently because she was playable in Captain Toad's Treasure Planet, and she also gets a female member in the main cast. Everything's great. However, Nintendo also added a new power-up which is exclusive to Toadette called the Royal Crown, and when she picks it up, she becomes a fusion of Peach and Toadette known as Peachette, which allows her to have the same gameplay abilities as Peach, you know, jumping high, floating to the ground, etc. It's a way of having Peach in the game, but also making up for the fact that Mario Bros. Wii U is a traditional Mario game, and thus Peach being kidnapped is the main plot. However, the internet, being the internet, suddenly thought, well, wait, if this crown makes someone into a fusion of Peach, what would happen if Bowser did it? And so, this led to the creation of Bowsette. And the internet has caught on to this idea of a evil dominatrix half-reptile version of Peach, especially given the fact that the internet being the internet, it looks sexy. There have been other variations of this, such as Bowsette, which is combining a Boo, the Royal Crown, and there have been other various combinations of Mario characters and enemies with the crown, but Bowsette's the biggest one that's caught the internet imagination, and there have been loads of cosplays and art all over the place.
Yeah. Oh my god. Why am I surprised by the internet? Also, really, the one thing that I'm relieved by is that the meme happened to Bowser and not Waluigi or Wario. Because, ew!
I'm sure someone has actually made that somewhere, but we just don't know about it. Even if it did happen, it being the internet, I'm not 100% sure if they would actually make it as ugly as you're thinking of. In fact, one of the amusing things I've seen is that there is an offshoot of the Bowsette meme, which is which has people drawing a slightly different version of Bowsette that says, and I quote, "Draw Bowsettes with muscles, you fucking cowards."
Oh god, I saw that one. It's the one I approve of. And also, all I am going to take from this is the internet will be the internet. I forget which rule of the internet it is, but it's proof of the one stating that porn exists of everything. And really, in the end, Jonin, years ago you asked the question, what sort of sick and twisted universe would the Mario world be if Peach really was Bowser Jr.'s mother? And horrifyingly, I think we got a glimpse into that.
Well, first off, I hate myself for knowing that the rule is 34. And second...
That's the one.
And second, yeah, honestly, I'm taking a much more jovial approach to this, because, like I just said, the internet is the internet, and frankly, I'm honestly just enjoying it, because this is just my shifting of appearance. Like, maybe back in my younger days, I probably would have rebelled again instead of being like, oh god, what has the internet done? But honestly, I will take people being expressive, be it through art or cosplay, than angry people shooting at other people for having fun, or claiming that homosexuality and transgender stuff are things that only exist on Tumblr. I'm not kidding. There are people who seem to think like that. But anyway...
Oh yeah, they are, and I can pretty well guarantee you how they're voting in this midterm.
Plus, well, there are two other things that do amuse me about the whole thing. One is that the internet accidentally kind of screw up the naming, because they called it Bowsette, not realizing that the reason it's called that is that it's a fusion of Peach and Toadette. So technically, if you were to go by the name, it's actually a fusion of Bowser and Toadette, as opposed to the fusion of Bowser and Peach, which would probably be something like, I don't know, Puser or Boweach? I don't know.
Or Beach? Huh. Yeah, doesn't really work as well.
Yeah, I know why they went with it, but I just find it kind of funny that it sounds good but completely misses the point of the original naming scheme. And the second thing I find amusing about this is that, again, the internet's the internet. This is probably gonna happen, whatever. I mean, even without this, be it cosplay or art, there's always Rule 63, which is if something exists, there's a gender-swapped version of it. There are constant examples of gender-swapped Mario, gender-swapped Bowser, etc. And some people have sexualized that for fun because, of course, it's the internet. What I find amusing is that the Royal Crown is an example of Nintendo overthinking a problem, but not thinking about it enough. Because this is a long, complicated way of making it so you can have Peach in the game without her actually being in the game, because you've turned her into a kidnapped damsel in this one. So, my thing would be either just have Toadette in there, or do what everybody else suggested when we were talking about this in private, just have Daisy in. It's literally the same character. Gameplay-wise, you treat her as pretty much the same in all of the Doubles games. In fact, she's in freaking Echo Fighter in Smash Bros. So why not use that if you really wanted Peach in the game?
Oh my god, that's a good point. And just to sort of round off the Bowsette note, I actually see where you're coming from, and I don't mean to be bitter toward the artist. I'm bitter toward the very concept of the meme, because a while back, unsuspectingly, without me even knowing what was going on, suddenly my Tumblr dash was filled with dominatrix peaches. And that went on for weeks, and I could not explain it. And then I looked into the story behind it, and I was like, Nintendo, why?
Yeah, honestly, the only reason we were talking about it in private was because of our D&D group, and Pav just casually said out of nowhere, hey, could someone explain to me what a Bowsette is?
Oh, he of blessedly little Twitter knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I just find the whole thing amusing, if nothing else, because, like I said, it's something that Nintendo could have avoided if they had just, thought about it a bit more. Like, say, we have this item that turns people into fusions of themselves and Peach. Is this going to cause the internet to go awry? I'm sure I'll be fine.
It's like Vince McMahon trying to turn a popular character heel, and just ending up making the fans wildly attracted to them. Cough, Becky Lynch.
Indeed. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. And now we are moving on to Infinity Zero's second question, which is actually appropriate given that it's our own season finale.
Best and worst series finales.
Okay, best series finale, Legend of Korra. Season 4. So good.
I'm gonna have to take your word for it. I still need to catch up with that.
Yeah, I've already reviewed it, but basically, with hindsight, I know what went wrong with Legend of Korra Seasons 1 and 2. It was meant to be a single season. Suddenly it was renewed last minute, and they had to hammer out a second season, which went terribly.
Yeah.
Then it became a long-lasting thing, and Seasons 3 and 4 were so much better, especially Season 4. Oh, my inner shipper is still so happy. And as for worst season finales, it's funny you should say that, because I watched one on Wednesday. I'm not sure if it's a series finale, if it will have some words for Jack Bender. Mr. Mercedes, Season 2. That finale was pants, man. Oh my god. I don't know what I expected from Jack Bender, one of the guys who turned Game of Thrones from generic edgelord bullshit to the stuff of nightmares, but I mean, at least it wasn't edge. It was just mental gymnastics, that season finale, and I'll get to that whenever I review the series and the books.
Fair enough. For the best finales, I'll have to give a moment to think about that, because there was a time when I would have mentioned a certain samurai manga series starring Rurouni that was very successful, and I would have happily said its praises about that, but then its author turned out to be a goddamn pedophile.
Yeah, as far as that goes, it has honestly been a year, because for similar reasons, not exactly the fact that he did it himself, but the fact that he defended one of them, I have lost all respect for Quentin Tarantino.
So yeah, that finale, that's gone off the table. So, and also, just to get it out the way, since we've talked about this series long enough and used it as a punchline long enough, Bleach. Finale was terrible. Go back and listen to our episodes on it if you really want to know why.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say, if we're branching off into manga, the ending of Bleach was, as YouTube user Weeaboo Reacts put it, dookie butter. And on the flip side, best manga finale? Oh, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I love you, FMA, so much.
Actually, yeah, now you mention it, that was a really good finale in terms of giving everyone, being true to the theme of the series and giving everyone a happy ending as opposed to just letting everything wallow in misery.
Yeah, it was so satisfying. It wasn't even all that emotional. It was over and it was sad that it was over, but you left perfectly content with how the series went. And that's something that I can't even say of, well, I can say it of Legend of Korra, but it was also an emotional roller coaster and people died in the finale, so...
Some other good series finales, the way Star Trek The Next Generation ended was really satisfying. I loved the ending of Madoka Magica. It's just a shame that there was a certain movie that undid it.
Worst series finales, if we're branching out a little more, Harry Potter. Book 7. Oh god, Book 7. So, J.K. Rowling has this weird thing going on, where as the years go on and her lore gets deeper, she just gets worse and worse. And Deathly Hallows was sort of the start of that, because Book 7 was a death fest that sort of showed how incompetent a writer J.K. Rowling really is. I mean, for God's sake. She actually said that she had to kill off 2 characters because she spared one in an earlier book, and Rowling, that's not how writing works. I'm not even published, and I know that. And on top of that, as far as the proper finale goes, the Babies Ever After ending. I'm so sick of the Babies Ever After ending. because after everything that happened to those characters, that's really the best thing you can think of for them to do with the post-war world. Just become, like, normal, unremarkable family drones.
It could be worse.
Like, before you move on, it's not that I have issue with the concept of relationships progressing to that point. It's just that, Rolling, you time skip to that point, and with the exception of one couple, gave none of them development. Like, we're supposed to believe this?
But actually, it could be worse, because now you've reminded me of another finale, which a lot of people had issue with, Digimon 02. So, it's an ending which, it's a baby's ever after ending, and everyone is married, and everyone has a baby. But it also gets worse in the fact, rather than being unremarkable families, they're too remarkable. As in, they're incredibly successful in their field, to ridiculous lengths. And it also undercuts the theme that they established literally 10 minutes earlier in the episode. No, not even 10 minutes, 5 minutes earlier in the episode. It undercuts its theme, because, to try not to get into too many spoilers and details, part of the plot of that is about trying to get a bunch of small kids to believe in themselves, and the way the main character of that series, Davis, does it is that he explains that it doesn't matter if you're not special or destined, or if you don't have any grand dreams, that's fine. You can just be happy with what you are. And he says that his only dream in life is to run a noodle cart. So that's all great and fine, except they then reveal in the next 5 minutes, oh, by the way, everyone has Digimon now, and all these people are successful, including Davis, whose noodle cart is apparently so successful, it's on the cover of Time magazine. I'm not making that up.
I don't know why the quote from Kung Fu Panda comes to mind. Noodles, don't noodles. I think the answer is don't noodles. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. The cover of Time magazine. I'm surprised that the writers of Digimon didn't go ahead and say that he won the Nobel Peace Prize for his noodles, single-handedly bringing peace between the United States and Russia.
Well, in fairness, the tensions weren't quite as bad as they were now, but yeah, it's just this weird, ridiculous thing, which I'm told is part of Japanese culture, that it's not enough to just be a happy adult. You have to be a very successful, productive adult who has also a proud family man to keep the system going.
Yeah, I've sort of got hints of that from what I've read of Japanese culture. If your noodle cart is not on the cover of Time magazine, you're considered to have shamed your family.
I mean, try to think of some Western stuff with good finales, but I can't think of any, because either the series is still ongoing, or you get finales that definitely feel a bit rushed, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer's finale is, to bring an example.
Yeah, there's been plenty of mediocre finales, like, actually, to round things off, Naruto. I still don't know what to think of that finale, because on the one hand, Sasuke's redemption felt completely unrealistic, but then he turned into an awesome mentor. It's a baby's ever after ending, but I love the next generation. And overall, I'm just like, what? Kishimoto, what am I supposed to be feeling?
I mean, part of it was just the fact that the series had gone on too long and it was just limping towards the end, really. It's what happens to a lot of series.
Yeah, and I mean, that's still better than the finale of Bleach, which was the equivalent of sticking a ticking time bomb under the plot and then launching it seconds before completion.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
Our next question comes from McDuck, who asks,
What Fire Emblem game should they remake next?
6 and 7. The Alib Anthology. Book it, Vince.
Yeah, that would be a great choice. I mean, the only other one I'd think of would be maybe Fire Emblem 4, just because that's the one game everyone won't stop talking about.
Yeah, even though, you know something, I've played Fire Emblem 4, and oh my god, I still have not recovered. It's not just that the plot was edgy, it's that the maps were the size of planets.
Yeah, some people like the dark turns of the story, and other people, again, have complained that the maps are too huge. But that said, after Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia, I'm pretty confident that they will be able to round out the gameplay into something that's, well, playable.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Because I still haven't played Fire Emblem Echoes, but I admire the work that they did.
I could thoroughly recommend it. And I will admit there is a part of me that also wants to see the Alib anthology remade. Just, well, A, because it means we'd finally get Binding Blade in the West for a start, but
Yeah, which, let's be honest, with the Fire Emblem fandom being the size that it is now, that could be a killer marketing decision. Because people have been wanting that for 16 years.
Indeed, yes. Plus, it would also rekindle my own nostalgia if they did bring Fire Emblem 7 along, which was the prequel to Roy stuff, because, yeah, first ever Fire Emblem game in the West, first one we played, and yeah, as we made it clear by our long talk through series, a lot of nostalgia and love for that one.
Yeah, it's sort of the classic, and the reason you're listening to this podcast right now. Basically, my vote goes to 6 and 7 because I think it would make Nintendo a ton of, as WrestleTalk would say, money! And because it would be awesome.
I would agree with you, but I would also like to see 4 just so I can finally see what the fuss is all about.
Yeah, and actually, package 4 with a remake of Fire Emblem 5 so I can hate myself all over again.
We'll have to see. I mean, hopefully it shouldn't be too far along since, well, let's face it, Fire Emblem has become one of Nintendo's big franchises now. Between Heroes and all the critical and, well, money successes they've had with that franchise over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say at this point it's probably the big 3 are Mario, Zelda, and Fire Emblem, which I never thought I would say circa the Fire Emblem 9 era, but here we are.
And speaking of things we wouldn't have thought about years ago, Luffy McDuck's second question, it's a bit of a long one.
Since 2001, the home console market has consisted of the big 3, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. Imagine a scenario where Sega didn't drop from the console business, and you were to replace one of those 3 with Sega. Which one would it be, or would you rather keep the big 3 as it is?
Get rid of Xbox and just move the actual good Microsoft franchises to PlayStation. Because, honestly, if there is one thing I've learned about console gaming in the golden age of it over the past 15 years or so, it is that if there was one console whose fans were largely responsible for all the worst disease of the console wars, it would be Xbox fans. Frickin' Call of Duty. Frickin' Call of Duty. I can't even be angry at Halo anymore because, really, compared to the Call of Duty fan base, the Halo fan base was a bunch of innocent little bunnies. And plus, it's Sega, and they had fantastic ideas during their golden age. We got Sonic, which could be considered a hit or miss thing nowadays, but we also got things like Shining Force, which is dead. Well, it's not dead. It's just been relegated to absolutely dreadful PlayStation 4 titles. And if Sega were still a thing now, we could legitimately see like a WWE WCW war between Shining Force and Fire Emblem. And I'd just be in the middle of it, being a fanboy of both of them, covered in strategy games.
I think we're in a very weird reversal of our normal dynamic where you're being positive and I'm being cynical, because I'm actually sort of thinking that all of the stuff you said is true. Yes, Sega did make, or at least help to produce, some great games on their console. Their consoles I'm a bit on. I mean, the Dreamcast had some great titles on it. It was a powerful console ahead of its time. It was badly mishandled by Sega's marketing division, and it's that division it's kind of hard to describe. I don't know if they would have continued to have made sensible decisions if they had been managed to be successful, and some of their marketing was a bit... I think part of the whole reason the console war ever became a thing beyond just a childish playground comparison was Sega's, like, aggressive marketing campaigns. We've talked about it before, like some of the most bizarre game commercials. Like, even it wasn't just like a Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis thing. Like, they were trying to do this so hard, even until one of the later generations. Like, I was trying to get footage of an advert for Nights into Dreams, and they were even doing some ridiculous nonsense like,
never been a game that's allowed you to fly, fluid and free, in real-time 3D. But especially not on that other system. Simply because, with only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.
and you just see this image of someone throwing a PlayStation console out the window, and it's like, dude, that's really the premise you want to sell your game on? Oh, we're better than Sony, yeah, we're better than Sony. Prove it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, man, I can't believe I made the WCW comparison because they went out of business in the same year for the same reasons. Because both companies' marketing and creative decisions were just kooky dukes. Like, if both companies had just had a better creative team who knew how to make human decisions, then it may in fact be that they both still be alive today. And I think that's the crux of the matter for me. If I were to have the power to go back and replace Sega's marketing team with, people who are not Kremlings, and actually give them that success, and also give them the ability to make a decent console, like, repeat the Genesis's success, basically, then that would be the scenario in which I'd want to see Sega replace, or at least fill the hole, and I do mean hole very literally, left by the Xbox.
I can see that. I mean, I guess it's good saying that even with their faults, Sega provided a different culture as opposed to Microsoft. I mean, there would still be like a Western gaming scene, but probably the Western culture Microsoft brings wouldn't be a part of it. But then again, I suppose Microsoft's, the current audience that filled the Call of Duty would probably transfer over to the PC. So, I don't know. I don't know if things would be better or not.
Yeah. Maybe it's just my bad memories of the absolute worst rung of the console wars. And you know something? I've just looked this up, by the way, just to see if I was talking out my ass, and I was not talking out my ass. For the exact same reasons, WCW and the Sega Dreamcast died on the same day.
Wow, that is a coincidence.
So, that was one of my more on-the-nose comparisons, but it worked out way better than I thought it would. So basically, I just want to see Sega succeed if I could go back in time and undo their failings.
I don't know, like you, it would be nice to see, for lack of a better word, that culture in gaming still be alive and give Nintendo, like, I guess a competitor on their level as opposed to Nintendo feeling like the odd one out in comparison to Sony and Microsoft. I don't know if things would really be better for it, though. Maybe that's just my cynicism getting the better of me. I don't know.
I get you there, but I do think, if nothing else, Nintendo would be pushed to take certain risks. Because to go back to the comparison that turned out to be absurdly accurate, when WWE actually had to compete with WCW, they wrote well and made good decisions. If Nintendo had a rival that wasn't on a completely different level, basically the NJPW to Nintendo's WWE, then it might be that they'd be pushed to make new ideas and take risks rather than reverting to the same old flagship franchises and Fire Emblem, basically. So that's a good thing that could come out of it, but I do see your point.
That's entirely fair.
Our next question comes from Toon Junkie, as illustrious as ever going into the winter months.
Now that I have completely crushed Richard the Dark Lord beneath my steel-toed boot,
Oh my god.
does this mean that peace and tranquility have once again been restored to the land, or have I taken his title of Dark Lord?
The power is in your hands, Toon Junkie, but just remember, with great power comes great responsibility. If you missed it, don't worry, they'll say the line again and again and again. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that is one way to sum it up. But yeah, for those who don't know, like, Richard was a scared character of VGT, and it's something that I've been thinking about. Maybe... Yes! Hello! Richard the Dark Lord here, and so... we need to sort this out once and for all. First off, that shoe wasn't steel, it was zinc at best. Second... you did not completely crush me! That banjo duel was right until the wire in the last note, and you know it! Thirdly, you do not take the title of Dark Lord! It's not like a wrestling belt, it doesn't just become yours once you beat it from me and... Huh. You know something? That's starting to give me some ideas. Yeah, you know what, yeah, fine, the land is in peace and tranquility. Congratulations, Toon Junkie, yeah, well done. You definitely didn't fluke that victory. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go and make some contracts.
Okay, first of all, I guess Richard was just on vacation like Kurt Angle. Second of all, wow. That's all I'm gonna say.
Sven, what are you talking about? I was just saying how I wasn't ever going to use him again. Did you not hear anything I said?
You know what? Never mind.
Okay. On that note, we go to the final question from Toon Junkie and the final question from this show and this year.
Sven, do you ever flamenco your piccolo when inside your squid museum?
Yes.
Okay then, that concludes this Q&A session for Jonin Monkey Broadcast. Oh god. Once again, thank you to everyone who sent in the questions, and please, by all means, keep them coming. Doesn't matter what the year is, we always have fun going through them because they take us to some crazy but fun places.
We visit whole new dimensions, especially whenever the Toon Junkie dimension attacks.
Indeed, yes. But as far as the Q&A session is, it wouldn't do just to end the show on that. No. We have two more sections to get through. The second, and probably the biggest, and that informs the main bulk of the show, is...
Crusader Countdowns!
Sup.
This is the section where, well, we do a countdown. Usually a top 5 on Sven's side and a top 5 on my side. And this time, given that this is a year of change, and also, admittedly, a year where I haven't kept up with MB as well as I should. Sorry about that. Moving swiftly on.
Well, let's just say technical difficulties happened. Yeah, life happens like that sometimes, so, no hurt feelings, I think. I hope.
Indeed. And, like I said, I made changes, and, well, one thing I've changed is the way I edit NB, which just made it much easier to do. But the whole reason I'm bringing up change is basically because it's a clumsy way of linking to the fact that our theme for today's countdown, if you haven't already read the title of the YouTube video, is our top 5 favourite face turns, or to put it in a way for people who don't want wrestling, heroic turns. It's a classic trope when the bad guy becomes a good guy. And just to clarify, we are defining this as bad guy. You have to be at least an antagonist that's turned into a good guy. You can't be like Bakugo and be kind of a douche but still on the good guy side the entire time. This isn't about becoming less of a prick, it's about actually trying to find redemption, or at least becoming a better person and not a villain.
Yeah, and we're also not gonna... Well, there'll be mentions made to, like, partial turns or almost turns, but they won't feature on the list proper because, well, to use a Bleach example, I'd really categorize Byaku Yakuchiki, for instance, as having done a face turn because, for one, he wasn't fully a villain, and for two, he never really became less of a dick. It's people who have fully made the switch, though some partial credit examples may be given in the honorable mentions. Spoilers!
And yeah, I think it should also go without saying that when we talk about the series, we're spoiling big plot points. Then again, a lot of these series aren't that recent, so I mean, I know people don't like being spoiled, but come on, there has to be a time limit on these things. There has to be.
Yeah. sadly, because I could probably talk about this subject at length if you give me the opportunity, but, well, YouTube wouldn't like that, and also we'd probably lose our viewership around hour 4, so we have to limit ourselves.
Indeed. Well, there are some YouTube videos that are 8 hours long these days, but anyway.
I'm thinking of the creepypasta compilations that for some reason I actually watch. But, yeah, on to the subject.
I guess I'll kick it off with my list then. Number 5! Jonin. There were multiple contenders for this spot, and I was a bit hesitant to include him on this list. In fact, the reason I ended up putting this guy at number 5 is because he's not really a villain for very long in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a pretty significant one for the series. At number 5, for the Ace Attorney series, Miles Edgeworth.
Ah, yes. Actually sort of the counter-argument to Byakuya earlier, because, let's be honest, Miles Edgeworth is a dick, and sort of remains one for a long time, but he undergoes sort of a paradigm shift and becomes an entertaining, sympathetic dick, which is a really interesting turn of phrase.
Yes. Basically, for those who haven't played the Ace Attorney series, as the title might suggest, it's essentially a courtroom drama. And from the second case onwards of the first game, well, cases 2 and 3, this is the thing. Ace Attorney only really has 4 cases, and this guy's only really the antagonist for 2 of them. But in cases 2 and 3, you're introduced to Miles Edgeworth, a prosecutor who is smarmy, overconfident, and pretty much only has one idea on his mind. Efficient victory at any cost. In other words, he doesn't really care so much about whether or not the victim was actually guilty or not. He's just determined to just efficiently get that verdict. He doesn't care how. Sometimes it comes from forging evidence, sometimes it's from trying to get people off on technicalities. Like, there's one point where the protagonist, Phoenix Wright, almost has like a guy cornered by revealing that, yep, he was definitely at the scene of the crime. There's no way you could know these details unless he had been in the room before. And then Edgeworth slides in and goes, I think it's time you confess to your crime of tapping the victim's phone.
Oh man, I remember that case. I was so infuriated. This is the thing. The game, it makes you like Edgeworth's style as a villain, because let's be honest, he's a douche, but he's cool. At the same time, it also makes you hate him, because he keeps throwing the most pissing annoying roadblocks in your road to getting righteous justice.
Indeed, yes. So it makes it an interesting turn that the last case, Edgeworth is actually the one that's convicted of a crime, or at least suspected of a murder, and it's up to Phoenix Wright to get him out of jail, because as it turns out, the two of them go way back, and Phoenix wants to, at the very least, return him to the man he once was. Kind of reminds him what true justice is, for lack of a better term. And he also go up against his mentor, Manfred von Karma, and I won't spoil that entire case, but long story short, Edgeworth finds out that his mentor was not the best person to have learned from, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and let's also say that's putting it diplomatically.
Yes. With Phoenix's help, he's able to realize, okay, I have taken a really bad choice in life. It's essentially everything he's believed for the past, I forget the exact time frames, like 5 years of his life, something like that. But he comes to the conclusion that he's been going about things the wrong way. And the game ends with him going on a journey to find himself and reevaluate how he looks at the law and justice as a whole. As a standalone story, which the game was originally, it was never intended to be this whole big series, but who would afford it? This courtroom drama series of visual novels became extremely popular.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons, and anyone who's familiar with Phoenix Wright will sort of know that. It's a courtroom drama with emphasis on the drama.
Indeed.
And also quirkiness. As Brintlefloss put it once, it's quirky, wacky, zany murder death.
Yeah, pretty much. But even after they continued into a major series, Edgeworth is still an important figure. He's a much better person now in that he is more focused on trying to find the truth rather than just getting a victory no matter what. But the quality he has and the reason why he keeps coming back, especially in a lot of the big important moments in the series, is because I guess the best way to describe their relationship now is more as a frenemy. Like, he's always there to challenge Right, and between the two of them, with him refuting Wright's arguments, they do eventually find the ultimate truth. Because the point that the Ace Attorney series has always had consistently is this idea that courtrooms should be about finding the truth, not about dealing swift justice, if that makes any sense.
I get you, and you put it so perfectly that their dynamic sort of becomes this balance of finding the truth between their two respective skill sets, and there's no better, in my view, example of that than the final case of the first game's re-release onto the DS, where the two of them take down the most powerful man in the law enforcement system by way of a sustained tag team. Well done, guys.
Yeah, that was a really cool moment, and yeah, there's not much else I can say. Edgeworth had a really nice, satisfying, dramatic turn at the end of the first game, and he's just become such an important figure from that point on. Again, he wasn't really evil for very long. In terms of out the story context, apparently he's been doing this stuff for years, but we only see it in action for like 2 cases. But he made such an impact that it was really satisfying to see him change, and he continues to have an impact pretty much any time he shows up, honestly.
And plus, it's Edgeworth, and I love hearing Kyle Aber get a chance to do his Eisen voice for a sympathetic character. That's an aside, though.
Indeed.
All-around solid choice. Really, in the context of Phoenix Wright, obviously the title character is of utmost importance, but you know that there's something special going on when the guy who is always there to challenge him is pretty much the second most crucial force in the entire series.
So much so that he got his own spin-off game.
Well done, dude.
So yeah, that's my number 5 pick. Sven, over to you.
Okay. Clocking in at number 5 is a character who I rank low on this list purely for the fact that his villain dynamic isn't really 100%, but he ends up on the right side in the end, and also he deserves to be on this list because he is a memorable badass whose various plot twists are some of the most memorable in any game I've ever played, really. Number 5, Sven. Kratos Orion from Tales of Symphonia.
Ah, yes.
Now, to reveal the reason why I sort of ranked this guy low despite his being one of the most iconic characters in the series from which he stems, it's sort of the weird nature of his villainy. He's revealed to be a member of the evil angelic organization Crucius, and probably the best plot twist I've ever encountered. Like, it comes on the heels of my favorite boss battle of all time, and leads into the continuation of that favorite boss battle of all time. But from that point on, he doesn't really play a straightforward villain, because he always seems to be there at the right point in time to give Lloyd crucial advice.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. He breaks the hero's hearts when he reveals that, yeah, actually, I've been working with the organization the entire time. And it's implied that if he is evil, it's more by complicity, as in, he just kind of lets the villain do whatever he wants because he's just given up at this point. But at the same time, it's not like he kills a puppy in front of the heroes or anything like that. I don't think he even kills anyone, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's an antagonistic force by association, even though he's not what I would classify as evil even after turning heel, to use the wrestling term. He's just sort of an obstacle in the path now who sort of lets the villains go about their business.
There's even, one skit conversation you can get where he essentially makes fun of Lloyd, because there's, one point where Lloyd just sort of catches him on his own, and he asks, "What are you doing?" and doesn't believe Kratos' first answer, and then Kratos just sort of sarcastically gives, "Fine, I was scheming to get rid of those who stand in Lord Yggdrasil's way. Does that make you feel better?"
I remember that skit. He appears in sympathetic contexts all through his time as an antagonistic force, which it lessens his outright villainous power, but he remains important and sympathetic throughout, which still makes it satisfying to see him end up on the right side of everything at the end of the story, which, by the way, also coincides with him being Lloyd's father. Spoilers.
Yeah, there is a definite switch, but it's less to do with him, like, changing, I guess, his morals, and more Lloyd and the others convincing him to actively take action and not just being a roadblock out of stubbornness, I guess, or lack of a better term.
Or out of, I want to say complacency, because he's so used to being on this side that he just sort of puts his own standards to one side, and it takes the heroes to sort of convince him to do what's right, even though he had it in him the entire time. It's less a continuum shift of his entire person, and more, or I guess, finding a reason to fight for what's right.
Yeah, I think that's the best way we can put it. And yeah, I totally agree with you that Kratos is a really good pick. The only other Tales character I'd consider to be in the same vein is Gaius from Tales of Xillia, but in his case, it's more that circumstances are what dictates the switch. Otherwise, he remains consistent in his philosophy and ideals throughout.
So all told, I think Kratos is the correct representation of this particular series. He's not a bad person or an evil person throughout the game, even after switching sides. It just takes the right pushing and motivation, the power of love and friendship, as Lloyd so drastically hates, to just put him on the right path again at the end. Because this is, essentially, he is an exceptionally old being. He is the oldest of the old guys, and he's just done. And it takes the heroes to make him not so done.
Indeed.
So, bringing up the rear of this list, in possibly the hardest to decide position on any countdown, number 5, Kratos, take your place.
Alrighty. And now moving on to number 4, Jonin. This next heroic turn is, well, it's about as traditional as they come from a game that, as we've talked about before, is very simple in terms of what happens in its plot, but manages to shine through its execution. From Fire Emblem 7, The Blazing Sword, Jafar.
Ah, yes. I sort of wondered if he'd end up on the list, because, well, reasons. But, yeah, sort of a classic turn, and one that young me refused to acknowledge until much, much later, because he was a stubborn little twit.
Yeah, I can see that. Jafar makes a very big impact into his villainy, because he starts off as a silent assassin that works for the villainous Black Fang organization, and in his first appearance, he makes an impact by killing a beloved side character, and in a very brutal fashion, because the assassin class was actually new to Fire Emblem at the time, and they wanted to show it off, so yeah, you got to see him use his full-on critical on her, which, yikes.
Yeah, and it's I talk about this because it's so embarrassing now, but it says something about how much of an impact it made on me, for the fact that I hated him for 3 years straight because of that.
I can honestly see why. Like, it impacted on me as well, although maybe not quite to that extent, and he remains on the side, but it's a kind of a cliche plot point, but there is a young girl in the Black Fang organization, a sweet, naive, optimistic girl named Nino, and usually the Black Fang's laws are, if their Black Fang member is injured and completely useless, you have to finish them off. And she is supposed to deliver Jafar a message, but Jafar arrives at the rendezvous point, covered in wounds, bleeding out, and in fact passes out during the briefing. But Nino saves his life, and so the two of them form a bond, although it's implied that it actually started much earlier in supports, but regardless, they form a bond, and so when Jafar is told to kill Nino as a scapegoat for another assassin job, that's when he decides that he would rather fight everyone in the Black Fang than risk Nino getting killed.
Yeah, and by everyone in the Black Fang, That's literal. Like, in the chapter in which he debuts, he is off on one corner of the map as an NPC fighting literally everyone. I'm talking hundreds of units.
It's a really great chapter, and it's also a great way to kick off the redemption of these two. I mean, it obviously sounds cliched, and part of the reason he's at number 4 is that his character doesn't really change or progress after that. He becomes a unit you can use. I mean, you can still have support conversations, but a lot of the supports are pretty much just confirming what you already know, in that he really likes Nino, and he sort of just passively sits there while Matthew yells at him for one of the other supports.
Yeah, although in one support we do get... I forget if it's a support or like an actual scene. We do get a vision into how he was raised. By which I mean I think he was found at the scene of a massacre as a baby by Nurgle and raised to be a killing machine for his entire life.
Yeah, I think that was actually in the support conversation with Nino afterwards, I think.
Yeah, and... well, it took me a while to discover all the supports in Fire Emblem, and it was sort of at that point that 14-year-old me, the King Edgelord, looked at that and thought, okay, everything makes sense now. And now I hate Nurgle and his morphs even more.
Yeah, and that's... I mean, it's really all I can say about it. It's a very simple turn, but it's a very classic in the way it's done, and the execution is done really well. Just in terms of the pacing of it, the time it takes to grow, because it's a strategy RPG and they have plenty of time to do it. Plus also elements like the music and the way the characters look, that all contributes to it. So yeah, very simple turn, but made in just the right way to make it so that even to this day, it's still very impactful and still very, or at the very least, still very memorable to me. And it's part of the reason why Fire Emblem The Blazing Sword still has nostalgia with us, because, yeah, we can look back and see, oh, it's cliched and some of these parts don't make sense, but they were very well done.
Yeah, it's sort of the sum of Fire Emblem 7. It's very simple and to the point. The plot is not... it's not as, intricately thought out as the otherwise cliched plot of Fire Emblem 9, or as much of a brain bender as the plots of Awakening and Fates, but it's simple to the point, and it gets itself across, even though some plot threads are a little silly, and that turn just sort of encompasses that.
Mm-hmm. Jafar firmly takes the number 4 spot. Sven, over to you.
Okay, on the note of terrifying, emotionless redheads who were raised from birth to be monsters, I'll just cut straight to the point and say number 4, Sven, Gaara from Naruto, who is more similar to Jafar than I realized.
Yeah, now that you've mentioned it, yeah.
So, Gaara in Naruto, he's introduced as the son of, I believe it's the 4th Kazekage, or is Gaara... no. He's introduced as the son of the leader of the village.
Yes, that's probably the best way to put it. He comes from the Sand Nation in particular, I believe.
Yeah, and he's essentially royalty in that sense, except he's also viewed as a pariah and a living nightmare. Even by his siblings, and, well, I'd say also his father, but his father is a, well, colossal bag of dicks.
Yeah.
We're introduced to Gaara as that, and we're also introduced to why he's viewed in the way he is, because he's a terrifying force of nature who does not understand human emotion thanks to the way he was raised, and the force that is living within him. The monstrous Kukaku, the one tail of the 9 demons that are introduced in the series living in their hosts, Naruto being one of them, host to the famous 9-tailed fox. I can breathe.
That's the one slight problem with anime. There's so much of world lore, but yeah, it's Gaara has been through a lot, partially because he's the host of this monster, but also because during the process in which he became this, it led to his mother died during childbirth, which is part of the reason why his father, the Kazekage, and pretty much everyone in the village has it out for him, since they kind of all blame him for it. and even the one person who seemed to be nice ended up trying to kill him.
Yeah, so Gaara was sort of put on the path of being a monstrous force of nature, sort of by the circumstance of everyone around him. Because the one loving force in his life died early, and that's trauma layer number 1. His father was... yeah. The only other person who showed him affection was basically a backstabbing shark. and it's sort of instilled in Gaara this idea of basically trust nobody and live up to the reputation.
Yep. So you had this combination of a scary, cold-hearted individual who will brutalize anyone that tries to fight him, but then you also had a guy who, A, cannot understand human emotions, and B, when he's confronted with them, breaks down a lot. Like, there's one point where, I believe it's after he faces Rock Lee, and Guy steps in to prevent Lee from being killed. That causes him to freak out, because he's not used to that idea.
Yeah, and, bonus points in the English dub at least for Liam O'Brien doing that scene justice, despite the fact that he is a very deep-voiced man trying to sound like a 12-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it does kind of fit for Gaara, given the twisted nature of him, to be honest.
Yeah, that's another thing entirely, and a whole series of jokes I could make about the Naruto cast. But essentially, that's sort of Gaara's entire struggle through the course of pre-Shippuden Naruto, which is sort of hard to remember at this point because Shippuden lasted for so bloody long. The struggle to get in touch with his humanity, because he wasn't born evil. He was born with evil inside of him. But, at one point, like everyone, he was just, in fact, an innocent child. And his arc sort of revolves around understanding his own humanity and the humanity of those around him. Which, of course, is delivered, as it always is in Naruto, at the hands of a therapeutic beating by the protagonist.
Indeed, although, unlike some other cases, it actually has a bit more of a thematic connection, because, like you brought up, Naruto also has a tailed beast inside him, so it's actually the reason where he can actually speak from the same place as Gaara, and pretty much says, yeah, I'm in exactly the same situation, and friendship was literally the only thing that pulled me out of that.
Yeah, someone shows him empathy, which is sort of the thing he's lacked his entire life. His siblings view him as a sibling, but also have the image instilled of Gaara as being a terrifying monster. And pretty much with the exception of his mother, nobody else in his entire life had showed him even an ounce of compassion, or understanding, or sympathy. So having that introduced to his life is it's a shock to the system, and it sort of sets him on the right path toward, becoming a functional human being.
Yeah, it's one of the first very effective, I guess, heroic conversions Naruto makes, because I know some people will probably point to Zabuza. Zabuza was pretty much a douche until right at the very end, and even then his heroic act is killing a guy, so I'm not sure if that's going to count.
Yeah, essentially Zabuza's turn was if you tried to turn Lu Along a hero from sort of The Stranger.
Yeah.
And people would probably also point to Neji, but he's one of those partial examples. He's an asshole like Byakuya, but he's on the right side from the start.
Yeah, that was part of the reason why we were insistent on not including stuff like that, because Neji was always presented as he's from the Leaf Village and he's kind of a douche, but Gaara was presented right from the start that, no, this is an antagonist, look at what he did to Rock Lee and some of the other ninjas who got in his way.
Pretty much. So, in the context of Naruto and sort of the hazy field turns, this was sort of the one that went the full mile, actually turned an antagonist heroic by actually very believable means, if cheesy.
Plus, Gaara did become, one of their most trusted allies throughout the entire series, and actually became Kazekage before anyone else.
Yeah. Let me reinforce that. He became Kazekage at 13. And a hero in the process.
That is definitely a good change, so yeah, I can totally see why you'd include him on this list.
Yeah, like I said with Edgeworth sort of becoming a force for good in the series, Gaara retains huge importance throughout Naruto. It also has a new status and new affection from his siblings, who are also characters I love, so really a turn all around for the better.
Also, he's one of the few people who actually becomes one of the ninja leaders, aside from Naruto, that actually make any sort of thematic sense.
It's true, actually. Oh. Epilogue problems. At number 4, solidly, is Gaara. Well done on your life success, man.
Okay, then. Number 3, Jonin. This is a particular late entrant because there was actually one character I wanted to include by the name of Papillon. Unfortunately, he's from a series who the creator was found out to be a pedophile.
Yeah, again, Jonin may be bitter about that, but then again, who wouldn't be?
Yeah, and I know some people may say, oh, but that shouldn't really affect his work. Yeah, I totally get that. I don't regret my enjoyment or the lessons I've learned from it. But I do regret having to recommend a work by a pedophile and thus making him money.
Yeah, exactly that. And plus, I'm a firm believer in the Johnny Cash lyric from Streets of Laredo, don't mention his name and his name will pass on.
Indeed. So, with this in mind, I actually sort of went back over potential replacements, and I was jogged in a memory, something I'd forgotten about when we were first planning this, but then I realized, oh no, wait, those were totally good moments. In fact, this is kind of cheating in the fact that I've merged two characters, but they're both from the same series and they're both good for different reasons. So, from the series Digimon, or to be more precise, Digimon 02 and Digimon Tamers, Ken Ichijoji and Beelzemon.
Okay, I am not in the least bit familiar with Digimon, so this is going to be an interesting experience for me.
I fully appreciate that, because it's kind of weird. This was all around the time when I was in college, I had just acquired satellite TV for the first time, and I had far too much time on my hands, so I binge-watched a lot of kid stuff that was coming on then. One of them was Digimon. The reason these two stand out for me is because they were big dramatic turns, and in Ken's case, probably one of the few good things about 02. I mean, 02 wasn't a bad series per se, but it was a series with a lot of problems. It can be kind of summed up in the sense that when we first meet Ken, he is in fact the new antagonist that is causing a lot of problems in this sequel series. Part of the reason we have to get a new set of protagonists instead of the old ones is because he's found a way to completely nullify all of the previous heroes' powers. He is this human who has entered the digital world and is enslaving all the Digimon under his control. The Digimon Emperor. And for the first part of 02, he's revealed as the big antagonist. But it's revealed that he is in fact manipulated by, I forget how to pronounce her name, Arukenimon, I believe her name is. He was manipulated by her, she was manipulated by a man named Orikawa, and he was manipulated by Myonismon, who is a villain from the previous series who is somehow still alive.
Oh my god, Moffat, is that you?
Yeah, actually, yeah, it is kind of like a Moffat twist in that pretty much every villain, they couldn't just fill in the slot, they had to pretend, oh no, the previous villain was under my control. Yes, definitely, we had definitely planned this is not an arse pull.
Oh man. You know what? It's like the rushing nesting doll of plot twists.
Yeah. But the reason why Ken is one of the most memorable parts is because, like I said, he is the main force to having to fight throughout a good chunk of 02, like at least the first proper big bad. And there is this whole big finale when, in the style of Shonen, the heroes get a power-up that comes out of nowhere and is never mentioned again.
Fair enough. I'm used to it at this point.
Yeah. They defeat the Digimon Emperor and his latest creation, Chimeramon. And he's in the middle of his destroyed base with the heroes surrounding him and just mentioned him saying, Ken, we're finally bringing you in. And Ken is just sort of sitting there, batting his fist saying, oh, they must have cheated somehow. I will just go back and reset the digital world and make sure it doesn't cheat this time. Ken? This is real. What? It's not a game. Digimon are actually living sentient creatures. You didn't know this? And the revelation that Ken, Ken, that this is not a video game where he can play out his edgelord fantasies, but a real world that he is actually being completely destroying and dehumanizing. Let's just say that hits him pretty damn hard.
Wow. I gotta give him credit. He had more of a realization than most politicians.
Yeah, and in fact, the symbolism does actually stick in my mind of him screaming at the top of his lungs while stumbling around as parts of his Digimon Emperor outfit burst off and turn into bits of data before he finally gets back to his normal clothes. And it then follows with an episode which is actually kind of unusual. Well, it's unusual for 02. Digimon has always had, big emotional hammy moments, but it was different from 02 as it tended to be light, fluffy stuff with barely any consequences or stakes. And it's a kind of quiet episode of contemplation where he's sort of remembering back through everything that led up to this point. The fact that after his gifted older brother died, he was kind of pretty much expected to take up the mantle of being this gifted super prodigy, and so it kind of led to a bad combination of him A, trying to be that prodigy and gaining a complex for it, but B, also needing to get away from people, and that's how he found the digital world, and it became this unfortunate outlet for him. And so the episode actually ends with a sequence I really like, which is Ken in the middle of a Digimon hatchery being scolded by some of the younger, more childlike Digimon for all of his stuff, and he's just sort of sitting there crying in the middle of it and going, "I'm so sorry, can't I start over?"
Wow. Okay, whenever it comes to face turns, phrases like that always get me because humanity, man.
Yeah. It's also nice because that's eventually what allows him to bring back his partner, Digimon Wormmon, who, let's just say, at the beginning of the series was this unfortunate lackey that was always getting kicked around and did eventually die. But this was kind of a nice way to, at the start of that, and also to show that Ken was redeemable. And the fact that his feelings allowed Wormmon to come back, which meant that it was justification for Ken going forward and joining the heroes throughout the rest of the series, which, admittedly, after that point, he kind of becomes sort of a bland character. There's not much to his personality aside from an inferiority complex, which, in fairness, realizing you're an evil dictator might do that to you, but,
Yeah, but hey, at least, unlike certain real-life dictators that I could mention, he actually realized that was a bad thing.
So, but the significance of that term and the way it was done, particularly, again, with the hokey nature of 02, I mean, for crying out loud, this is a series that ends with a noodle merchant becoming, getting on the cover of Time magazine, for crying out loud, but,
Noodles bring world peace.
But yeah, his was a really good one, and another good example, which I'll go over quickly so as not to get too long, is Beelzemon. The best way I can describe the big roller coaster this character goes on, because Tamers is my favorite Digimon series, and the fact that, admittedly, its big flaw was that the writer failed to grasp that it's a series of children, and actually made it so complex that most people don't actually get the subtlety and characterization because it was way above its target audience.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that's the basic flaw of them. He actually sort of was writing complex characters who had to deal with things like being the child of a single parent, being grounded and ordinary, and viewing the world of a childlike innocence, and having to realize the world doesn't work that way. Things like that. Unfortunately, as Jacob Chapman put it, it's great writing, but it's terrible for children because, again, it's the wrong kind of audience.
Yeah, so, good job on writing proper, but bad job on knowing your audience? That's sort of like trying to make functioning adults believe anything in WWE.
Yeah, so The sum up Beelzebub's character, he starts off as a character named Immon, who is... He's kind of like Team Rocket in the best way I can describe it, that he's sort of seen as an annoyance, but never an actual threat. Like, he'll occasionally pop around and make fun of the other Digimon for wanting to believe in humanity, but never actually considered a serious threat. This eventually gets to him. He decides he wants power and to be taken seriously, and he's offered that by the He's offered that by the Davers, who are a kind of antagonistic organization. That's the simplest way of putting it without getting into the ins and outs of the complicated relationship Digimon have with humans. Again, overly complex series for children. He's offered that strength, but he's told that in order to get it, he has to relinquish any ties he has to humanity. So this sort of comedic annoyance becomes a sociopathic monster who ends up killing Leomon, who is one of the decent good guys. And no, that's not a spoiler. As much as I like Leomon, he is the Sean Bean of Digimon. He's expected to die. It's a miracle if he doesn't.
Oh, that's so sad.
Without getting into the long and short of it, this leads into the heroes and a good chunk of the audience absolutely hating him and going out of their way to try and defeat him. It's only when he's spared by the heroes, particularly Leomon's partner, who says that she doesn't want to see anyone killed anymore, that the kind of full weight of what he's done is slowly getting to him. And he walks off, goes on a quest, reconnects with people, and comes back as a pretty cool good guy. But he doesn't become a main party member as such. He just shows up for one or two fights to do cool things. That's the best way I can describe it. And he does get one other big dramatic moment before he's taken out of the series until the finale. And it's actually pretty tragic. The monster they're fighting, it has absorbed and sort of kidnapped Jerry and is essentially... The best way I can describe it is using her as a model for humanity. The best way I can describe it, and also as a hostage, because that's useful. And Beelzebub, determined to make up for everything he's done, he does this, like, one-man army thing. He breaks through all the defenses, and he only has, like, a window of opportunity. He breaks in through this shield that's slowly repairing itself, and he puts his hand in and goes, "Jerry, take my hand!" Jerry, who is kind of, thanks to the effects of this, living in this kind of grief-induced, traumatized state, looks up, sees him and goes, "You're not Leomon," and refuses to take his hand.
Oh, wow. Holy crap.
Yeah, you can tell a hero and be all these things. Doesn't necessarily mean you're forgiven straight away, dude.
Yeah, and it's funny because we're going to get into more of that as this list goes on, but man, that's a sad way of presenting it.
Yeah, so, I mean, he is eventually forgiven at the end of the series by Jerry, but it takes a long while and he doesn't get to do much, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that these two heroic turns, as particularly how they turn, lead to some incredibly dramatic moments that many people consider to be the highlights of their respective series. So for those reasons, that's why Ken and Beelzebub hold the number 3 spot on my list.
And honestly, wow. I did not know Digimon could get so fucked up.
Oh, Tamers especially, man. Like, Tamers, oh man, if I went into the traumatizing events, especially in the last act, like, oh man.
Digimon meets Berserk. But in the meantime, yeah, that's a solid entry. And, you know, I noticed an interesting link between this entry and your last one, in that the characters sort of murder people important to the heroes, and forgiveness sort of takes a while.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, over to you, Sven.
Coming in at definitely not as intense a place as Jonin's example, but no less more impactful. Actually, because of just the human story this character's arc tells, and the simplicity of it. Number 3, Sven. From Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance, Jill Fizzart.
Ah, yes.
I'm sort of amazed myself at how far up the list Jill ended up, because her face turn sort of happens on the side of Fire Emblem 9, but it actually plays into an important overarching plotline because, well, Jill is a product of the Dayan military and the up society of Dayan, and also the product of her family, because her father is one of Dayan's most important generals. We meet Jill in command of a unit of Wyvern Riders fairly early on in the story, and she is displayed to be a run-of-the-mill Dayan unit commander. She's tough, she's fierce, and to her credit, brave and honorable, but she is also a dreadful bigot. You want to take the plot and the underlying message of Fire Emblem 9, Jonin?
Essentially, it's the classic trope of beast people being discriminated against by humans because they're beasts, they're terrified, they're clearly not human. And it also doesn't help that Dayan is so bigoted that it has essentially Lagoo's hunts from childbirth, and that's why Jill is the way she is. And it also doesn't help that the reason she joins your group in the first place is that you are attacked by a couple of Lagoo's pirates, which she just surmised that, oh yeah, this confirms my worldview. Hey guys, I'm defeating you to take care of these half-human beasts, even while Ike is protesting. But for God's sake, that's not how we see these people. Oh, who cares? Kill them!
Yeah, and the dynamic is amazing. Just sort of Jill's shift in the eyes of the protagonists, because Ike has two moments in the entirety of the Tellius anthology where he's like, could you please go back to the other side? One is Oliver in the second game, and the other is actually Jill, where he openly says, okay, you can join us, but if you keep espousing these views, f off.
Yeah, and in fact, the only reason she sticks around is because after that moment, they run aground and some dragon Lagoos help them out, which is something she never expected.
Yeah, essentially, in the course of one day, her worldview is backed up and then smashed. Like, full-on, let me smashed. So, Jill is thrown for a loop by that, and remarkably, by Fire Emblem standards, Jill gets a character arc outside of support conversations. Like, she has her support conversations, one with Leith, where she absolutely pisses her off, because of course she would. One with Mist, where Mist is just the pure cinnamon roll she is to Jill. But outside of that, Jill actually gets development through info conversations, where we see her worldview developing, how she's becoming very attached to this new group, and eventually the inevitable conflict that we know that she's going to have with her father, because Shiharam is a noble man. He's a good man, but he's loyal to Dayan and will not back down. And honestly, Jill stands out to me so much because she's so well written. Her worldview aside, she's very likable, and she plays a part in the overall story. And her becoming a solid member of the team is important to the story, and it's actually backed up by the story, because if she does not have an A-rank support with Leith or Mist, and you take her into the map where you confront her father, yeah, she'll flip back sides. So it emphasizes the importance of the group on her development, which is huge.
Yeah, exactly. It's very rare that you have a unit that can turn on you if you don't play your cards right in Fire Emblem. And it's funny that we were talking about dark moments a second ago, because, yeah, even if you do have an A-rank support, many of the units will call her traitor, because that map is set in Jill's hometown, so, yeah, a dark moment for her.
And the thing is, it's such an amazing chapter, because if you do go through the trouble of reinforcing Jill with support conversations and completely solidifying her development, you can have her fight her father herself. And there's this boss conversation where Shiharam closes it off by saying, essentially, you have no idea how proud I am of you for standing up for what you believe in. Now let's end this like soldiers. It's so moving, and it's so epic, and like I said, it's huge for Fire Emblem because your decisions have consequences on her character, and I love that. And just combined with the fact that she was written so likably despite being not a great person, and the depth of her support conversations, Fire Emblem support characters, like the sidecast, sort of get the short end of the stick because they're relegated to support conversations. And the fact that Jill is one of the few who is given closure outside of that as a character made her one of the most memorable characters in those two games for me. Even though she got completely shafted by Fire Emblem 10, but who didn't?
I mean, it really says something in Fire Emblem 10 when the conversation Ha has that can flip her from Micaiah side to Ike's side is, come on, you're better than this. They went through this whole thing last game, remember?
Fourth wall.
But yeah, you've pretty much summed it up of why Jill was such a great character, especially when she's not just connected to the main story, she's connected through to the main theme as well. That whole aspect of, I guess the best way you could put it is that it was her nurture that made her a bad person, not her nature, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and it also fits with the underlying theme that even when people are ignorant, even when people are bigoted, when it is just the result of their upbringing, and they're given the chance to question and learn from the mistakes and just general incorrectness of how they were brought up, people can change. And that, to me, it's a lesson that's become more and more important to me over time, especially as sort of a reminder of hope in the times in which we live. So, just generally, Jill, as a character, and with her plot arc, well, she made an impact on me. It has a personal meaning to me, which tells you something as to why, which actually is sort of a reflection on the bigness of the two remaining face turns on my list, that this is not actually higher.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what those other two are. I guess I should start off with my second one, and okay, I will freely admit, the next two, if I was going purely on the emotion of their turn, I would have probably bumped Ken and Beelzemon up higher, but these next two I find just fascinating. Just in the way they develop, like some of the unique changes and also what they eventually become is the best way I can describe it. And this second one, number two, Jonin. I find it fascinating from a metatextual context, and also just because, well, it comes from Street Fighter. And even though I don't know if I'm doing reviews in the future, I still want to do a Street Fighter retrospective, because once you start looking into how the narrative and the style of storytelling evolved, and the tiny compelling bits of lore mixed in with the incredibly weird retcons and bizarre plot points that are included, I just find it so fascinating, and especially since few people look it up. And Sagat is no exception. Like, Sagat is a character that has been throughout all of Street Fighter. In fact, he was the main antagonist for Street Fighter 1. The entire game is essentially based on him being a Muay Thai fighter who called himself the King of Fighters. This is before SNK ended up making a fighting game series with the same name. Sagat's entire thing was, I am such a good Muay Thai fighter, no one in Muay Thai can fight me, so anyone who wants to join a street fighting tournament, come at me, bro.
Yeah, I seem to recall that being the plot.
And this obviously leads into Ryu coming at him and eventually defeating him. That altered with Street Fighter Alpha, but as far as the rest of the world knew, in Street Fighter 2, that progressed so that he was one of Bison's henchmen, joining because he wanted to get revenge against Ryu, because his character design was altered so that he now has a massive scar across his chest that was left when Ryu did a Shoryuken across him. So, having been literally scarred by that defeat, he decides that he wants to get strong enough to defeat Ryu once and for all, even if he has to alter his techniques so that they can specifically match or counter Ryu. So he has stuff like the tiger uppercut and the tiger shots. And he also joined Bison to gain some boost from his psycho power. And for the longest time, because Street Fighter 2 was around for a long time before any new additions were added, people just accepted him that he was an antagonist, that he was always one of Bison's henchmen. Like, he was certainly that way in pretty much any adaptation that came afterwards, from the anime series to the anime movies, and even that goofy live-action movie.
Of course.
Exactly. Or the goofy cartoon series, This Is Delicious, etc.
Yeah.
He was always seen as that big, tall, douchey guy. It was then in Street Fighter Alpha, when the series started going into a more anime-based storytelling, that, well, A, a large chunk of things got retconned, and B, Sagat's story became far more interesting. Because, okay, the Alpha series is a transitional game, as in it takes place between Street Fighter 1 and Street Fighter 2. The game decides that it is going to turn Sagat into a good guy. That he does join Bison for Alpha 2 and gains a supernatural power boost, but he's starting to question, yeah, this gives me superpowers, but is it really worth it? Have I actually defeated Ryu if I had to resort to someone else's power to do it? And then comes along the turn, which I do seriously like as a story turn, but I also find it incredibly funny on a metatextual level. Okay, he is going around doing Bison's orders and seeking the day when he can defeat Ryu once and for all. Enter Dan Hibiki.
Oh my god. I never thought he'd be important.
Yeah, I should explain for those who don't know who Dan Hibiki is. Dan Hibiki was, and always is, a joke character in the Street Fighter universe. He was created specifically to parody Street Fighter's competitors at the time, the fighting games made by SNK. Like Art of Fighting, his entire moveset is essentially a watered-down version of Ryu's. Like, he has a less impressive fireball and less impressive uppercut. And like Terry Bogard from what was Fatal Fury but then became King of Fighters, he's loud, he's obnoxious, he's shouting catchphrases the entire time, and he's also has a generic revenge-based backstory. Specifically against Sagat. Because his father was killed by Sagat in a brief melee fight. In fact, that's why Sagat wears an eye patch, because during that fight, Dan's father took it out. And so, Sagat looks at Dan Hibiki as he steps forward and, with all of his gusto, yells, "Sagat! Today is the day you're going down! That eye patch looks good on you! Would you like another one to match?" And all of this. And Sagat looks at Dan Hibiki and thinks to himself,
Wait. Is that what I look like? Oh god. Oh god. Right, forget this revenge crap. I mean, I want to have some dignity. Jeez.
Yeah. Dan Hibiki is basically what you would get if you put Sokka from Avatar into the Street Fighter universe and took away all of his dignity.
Yeah, and upon seeing the true face of seeking revenge, i.e. this complete, loud, obnoxious loser, Sagat throws a fight so that Dan can have his little victory by essentially playing dead, and then decides, yeah, you know what, I need to rethink this. He then goes back to Bison and report,
Okay, you know what, it's been fun and all, but I'm gonna return these psychotic powers.
"Ah, Sagat, you've come at an excellent time. Remember that Ryu guy? Well, I brainwashed him. Here he is. He's on our side."
Right, okay, I'm definitely turning this in now.
Okay, this so far has to be the funniest face turn yet. This is just comedy gold.
Yeah, it's amusing, but I do like it in a way that it just completely stands out. And so Sagat and Ryu have a full-on fist fight, and Sagat, during it, reminds Ryu that this is not who he is. And Ryu takes the power that Bison was trying to use to brainwash him and blasts Bison with it. It is probably the most satisfying Hadouken we've seen yet. This then leads to the two of them having this kind of weird Zen fighting experience where Ryu ultimately comes to the conclusion that fighting other people and learning from each interaction is the best way to move forward. And Sagat, though he doesn't say it out loud, does agree to this, decides to quit Shadowloo and develop himself into a better fighter. And so, well, first we get a massive retcon in that Capcom is being very hand-wavy with him, and that, in Street Fighter 2, he's not with Bison, and just very high up the bracket. Capcom are being very shifty about what Sagat was actually doing during Street Fighter 2, but from Street Fighter 4 onwards, they've made it perfectly clear that Sagat is now a full-on good guy. Like Ryu, he is now seeking to better himself, and from Street Fighter 4 onwards, he is now officially voiced in the English dub by Isaac C. Singleton Jr.
Yeah, and may I just point out that as is also the case with Taliesin Jaffe, who I met through this series, one of the actors I know from Hellsing, because he was the main antagonist of the 2001 anime version of Hellsing in the English dub. But hey, at least the cast was good.
Indeed. And it's actually funny that you mentioned Taliesin Jaffe because he's actually the voice director for, at the very least, Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, and, it shows. He has good taste.
Yes. His voice adds a lot of power to Sagat, especially since throughout Street Fighter 4, especially in Super Street Fighter 4, he pretty much begins the game with a soliloquy. He realized the height of his arrogance and ego, and is just wanting to have good fights to answer the question, have I actually improved since those days? Am I still an egotistical douche, or have I actually learned something? So he's continuously meeting and fighting people until he can fight Ryu again, but this time just to confirm, am I a better person than what I was back then? Which I find incredibly compelling as a character, and on top of that, now that he has that voice and is still a good guy, he still gets to drop the badass one-liners, but without being a complete douche.
Yeah, so it's a way for him to keep doing what he's doing, at least from what I understand, without being a villain, which is cool. Indeed,
yes, and on top of that, when he's going up against people who deserves it, yeah, he really tears into them.
That's the sort of badass hero I can appreciate.
Especially since he now also, they don't unfortunately get named, at least if they are not in any of the mainline games, but it's implied that he now also lives in a Buddhist monastery and has 2 kids who look up to him and like to hang out with him, which I also find very adorable.
Oh man, he's granddad.
And the only reason I mention those kids is because they lead into the ending of Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and he's one of the few people who come out of that game looking good. Yeah, the game is, I want to like it, and it has some good rival scenes, but it kind of, it's one of those times when they only have, like, a very basic grasp of who the characters are, so a lot of the time they became bad comedic versions of themselves, or when you have the canon pairings, which is the only way you can have, like, the unique cutscenes, rival endings, etc., most of the time, the opening narration has to point out how stupid the tag team is. Like, Kazuya and Nina are working together, despite the fact that Nina actually tried to kill Kazuya one time. Or Balrog and Vega are working together as a tag team, despite the fact that neither of them can stand each other. And Bison and Yuri are working as a tag team, despite the fact that Yuri has never worked for Bison, and Bison killed her parents. But apart from that, they're great tag
Yeah, not the best.
Yeah, and so with Ryu and Ken getting an absolutely generic ending that leaves sequel bait, despite the fact that no one was ever gonna make a sequel to this game, Sagat ends up coming out the best of it because he gets paired up with Dulcim, which is a tag team I did not expect, but actually makes perfect sense since the two of them are both calm, meditative personalities. And he gets a badass line which does signify his growth, because they find the Pandora box, the giant MacGuffin that does whatever each scene requires of it, and
The power in this box, it is said to be a power to rival the gods. Well, Sagat, what now?
The power of the gods? A king has no need.
and walks off, cradling the children he's rescued from the Pandora box, and the box just powers down, knowing that neither Sagat or Dalshim are gonna take its temptation.
Okay, that's awesome.
Granted, it's still Street Fighter, so it's a bit goofy, but just for the metatextual context and the creative turn it takes, even if it's not the most emotionally impactful, that's why Sagat's at number 2. He's not very emotional, but very fascinating.
Honestly, that's fair.
So Sven, I'll pop over to you and let's see who your second pick is.
Okay. Touching upon the very origin of the term we've been using, face turn, I figured it would only be appropriate to include a representation of wrestling itself, and it's really unfortunate because most famous wrestling face turns either happened before I got into it, and before I was able to understand what wrestling was, or honestly were mostly completely unremarkable, because everyone always talks about heel turns and they're usually the best done. But one fairly recent example stands out to me, and it's all the more remarkable that the company in charge of this guy actually wrote him well. So, number two, Sven, representing the continuum of WWE, Seth Rollins.
Ooh. And also, I think you mean Universe. Don't want to get fired now, do you?
Screw your universe, Vince. So essentially, Seth Rollins made his start as a character as a, sort of a mega face on NXT, where he was the inaugural NXT champion, like a legendary high flyer even before his time in WWE, and just generally people loved him. And then he was put into the stable, The Shield, who started off as sort of a heel team under the thumb of Triple H and The Authority in 2013, also featuring fellow NXT stars Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. I think it was circa 2014, which was a wild year for wrestling. Midway through the year, Seth broke up The Shield, by which I mean he, on the orders of Triple H, sniped them with chair shots. And from that point onward, for the next 3 years or so, Seth Rollins became the most unlikable chicken on the entire roster. There was no liking Seth Rollins. He was WWE's F-Adel. A backstabbing coward who, despite being an impressive force in terms of ability to fight, preferred to threaten, bluster, and use underhanded, morally reprehensible tactics to enact the will of Triple H, his villainous mentor and start of darkness, and the man to whom he was heir apparent for a few years. He went from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds, because everyone was heartbroken about the breakup of The Shield, and let's be honest, Seth Rollins plays an amazing heel. Then again, everyone in The Shield plays an amazing heel.
Remind me, was it during his heel phase that he used the Money in the Bank contract to essentially jump on Roman and Brock Lesnar during their title match?
Yes, actually. And it was the one time people could stop booing heel Rollins, because nobody was happy with either possible winner of that matchup. In fact, he had the Money in the Bank contract for longer than anyone else, and people were like, oh my god, is he ever gonna use it? And then he used it. He cashed in at WrestleMania 31 and became the champion. And also entered his most insufferable phase. But then again, that was deliberate, unlike Roman being insufferable. But I'm gonna tone that down for reasons we'll get into.
Yeah. All I'll say to people who know this sort of thing is that we mean the character, nothing else to do with the person. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, and to be fair, Roman's booking was dreadful in 2015. But yeah, so essentially Seth turned heel, became Triple H's lapdog, this being before people liked Triple H, and won the championship and became absolutely horrible. Like, I mean that in a good sense, because he was playing a good heel, but nobody liked him at all. It's not even like an ironic, okay, this guy's a douchebag, but we love him because he's entertaining thing with The Miz. No, Seth Rollins was detestable. And then Triple H turned on him and put the Universal Championship on Kevin Owens in 2016. Which, I mean, it was enough of a flashpoint for a face turn, but then legit happened, and Colby Lopez, the man who plays Seth Rollins, legitimately destroyed his knee at a house show.
Ooh.
So he was put on the shelf for months, and people suddenly found a lot of sympathy for Seth Rollins. Especially whenever WWE very smartly and tactically played that up and showed his recovery process, basically turning him face and making him look human again through non-stop video packages. So when Seth returned as a proper face in the lead up to WrestleMania 33, a show with which I have endless issues, but not this particular plotline, because Seth returned to massive popularity, in fact ambushing Triple H on NXT to antagonize a match at WrestleMania because Triple H betrayed him, and more or less Seth destroyed his body for this man. And all the thanks he got for it was ridiculing and being thrown aside. Mistreatment-induced WrestleMania match, basically. So come WrestleMania 33, Seth challenged Triple H, had the coolest intro in history, and beat the big man himself to the only pop of the night.
Yeah, that was a good match, but there was also one segment I wanted to point out, because I remember the build-up to this, and I remember this segment because I still enjoy it. Essentially, to get around the why you beating up an injured man, Triple H has him sign a contract which pretty much says, it's pretty much illegally okay for me to beat you within an inch you're alive, even if you are injured. And there's this whole conversation where he tries to talk Seth out of it, saying, hey, look, just abandon your conscience. I mean, I believe that was the great line, I would rather eat well than sleep well. You can either join with me and be rich, or you can go back to bingo halls and just be an average nobody wrestler. And Seth Rollins says,
when you're out rehabbing, and you should know this better than anybody, when you're out rehabbing, you have a lot of time to think, to gain perspective. You know what I learned about me? I liked myself before I met you. And sure, when you and I got together, side by side, man, we accomplished a lot. But at what cost? What did I give up for that? At WrestleMania, you better be prepared to tear my leg off my body and beat me with it. You better have a stretcher standing by to guide me out of there, because there will be nothing that can stop me from tearing you apart and getting back what matters most to me in my life, and that's who I was before I met you.
Yeah. Essentially, it's almost a Star Warsian turn. It reminds me of Anakin, because he was corrupted by the Dark Lord, he had his phase as the evil Emperor's right-hand man, and then something happened to prompt him turning back to what he once was. And that's the underlying theme I love of this, because it's subtle writing from WWE.
yeah, that really never happens.
Yeah, and really the face turn itself was remarkable, because at first people couldn't believe that they were making Seth Rollins face after all the shit he did, but then his injury happened, he came back, got that huge pop, then the Shield reformed, Seth became Intercontinental Champion twice, and while all of this was going on, WWE's other writing was dreadful, like WrestleMania 34 was in some ways even worse than 33. And through all of this, Seth being so well written and also just generally one of literally the best performers in the entire world turned him into the hero of the company, which is saying a lot of the guy who at one point literally nobody liked.
Yeah, at this point he is one of the popular stars. He is one of the people being pushed by WWE that doesn't get booed for being pushed, so...
Yeah, even though here lately they have for some reason forgot about the existence of his Intercontinental Championship, he's at the very least at the upper mid-card, and he's one of the only people in the Raw roster who is in the main event scene and people like. And considering where he was as of 2014 and onward, that's saying a lot. And it really does boil down to a heroic person being corrupted, realizing they were being corrupted, and then seeing the light again. And again, it's subtle writing from a company that is often as subtle as you once put The Force Unleashed, a nuclear explosion. Just the sheer magnitude of the turn, especially in recent days where Seth has just been the most pitiable man. Like, oh god, the last episode of Raw was rough.
Yeah, we may get to that later.
Yeah, for multiple reasons, that Raw was rough. So, the sheer magnitude of him going from the ultimate chicken heel to the hero of the company, it makes a person feel warm and happy. He went from the lapdog to CrossFit Jesus, and that's a story we can all get into.
Oh, I keep forgetting that he was called that.
People actually chanted it once before Grand Slam Rollins became his new moniker.
Oh, God.
But hey, I still prefer it to the CM Punk chants.
Yeah, true. Wrestling fans are weird. Yeah, that is a good choice. It's one of the better face turns. I'd probably say the best face turn in recent years of the WWE, so...
Yeah, in fact, honestly, the only face turn I can think of with magnitude like that would be Steve Austin, and that's a huge comparison to make, especially considering that I wasn't even around for that era of wrestling.
Indeed, yes.
And on that note, I pass the ball back to your court as we move on to number one, and actually first, honorable mentions.
Yes, good point. So, some quick honorable mentions on my end. We've already covered Neji, and I would cover Bakugo if he was, actually a villain at any point. I also would include Gaius and Muse from Tales of Zilliard for reasons I've mentioned earlier. Sven?
Okay, very, very simply on my end, 3 entries that didn't really make the cut. First and foremost, Ulquiorra, who looked like he was gonna have a big turn in Bleach, and then he died the stupidest death imaginable. Caleb from Critical Role, who's never been a villain but was a terrible person before the Mighty Nine started changing him. And then Javert from the Mesorabe. Credit Javert for realizing your worldview was wrong. Jill did it well, you did it well. Lost points for throwing yourself off of a bridge because of it.
And it's just because I'm sure some people are still balking at us for not including it. Darth Vader, he's pretty much there just because, well, A, his heel turn wasn't the greatest, and B, he did one very good act at the very end, and then promptly died. It was a powerful moment, don't get me wrong, but I'm not 100% sure if you can count it when it's 95% villain and then hero in the last 5 minutes.
It's sort of like Javert. He realized his worldview was wrong, did a good thing, pinned his French Medal of Legion badge on the deceased Gavroche, and then killed himself. Sort of kills the luster, literally.
Especially in that live-action movie version.
Splat.
Now we go into number 1. And it is funny. If you had asked me this several years ago, I would have never included this dude. I'm sure some people would have put him on the list, but I personally not only didn't care for the character, but couldn't really stand him. In fact, 18-year-old me used to have a hot take that everything that bad that happened in the series was somehow connected to him. My number one pick, Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z.
Yep, this is the one I figured it'd be.
Okay, so, just to give a quick explanation, face turns are nothing new for Dragon Ball. As has been pointed out many times, a large chunk of its cast are villains Goku faced but is then redeemed through just fighting them. Although, admittedly, Goku didn't have a hand in redeeming all of them. Piccolo was more redeemed by his son Gohan, but we're getting semantics here. Point is, a large chunk of the Dragon Ball cast are former antagonists who turned good. And this includes Vegeta, but Vegeta is an interesting exception, because if you just talked about Dragon Ball Z, then he would not be on this list. The best way I can describe is that I was thinking of the best way I could describe this, and not to the audience, then at the very least to you, Sven. And it's funny you mentioned wrestling not have any effective face turns, which is the term used in wrestling, because I actually thought of the most apt comparison that would explain why people loved Vegeta, but also why I didn't really care for him. Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z, only in terms of broad strokes, not in terms of direct personality, but in terms of broad strokes, Vegeta was Braun Strowman.
Pretty much. and it's funny you should say broad strokes, because I very briefly misheard it as bronze strokes, and I was like, well, that's appropriate.
Yeah, Vegeta is basically Braun Strowman. Like Braun Strowman is a big, muscular, rampaging monster who has been both good guy and bad guy, but when he turned good guy recently, there was never actually a point where he was made sympathetic. Like, there was never a point like Seth Rollins where he questioned his behavior or was put into a bad position that made people care for him. It was just more circumstances shifted slightly so that Braun Strowman was going up against bigger, badder people, and because of his big, over-the-top personality, people really liked him for it, so they decided, well, I guess he's a hero now.
Yeah, another comparison that I've been making, especially to Braun Strowman, is Kenpachi from Bleach, who is a maniac. He never changes. He always looks for fights in the nearest available source of death, and generally just remains an unhinged badass throughout the entire thing. And that's why people like him.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the same with Vegeta. Like, he was a prideful, cocky, arrogant asshole who purely believed in his own hype of, I am the Prince of Saiyans, therefore I am the strongest, most pure Saiyan you could possibly meet. And he didn't really change. It was just that the group was going up against his boss Frieza, and he was realizing, okay, right, I may need to work with you because I don't know if you met this Frieza, but he's a pretty bad dude, and even for me, the Prince of Saiyans, it's going to be pretty tough. But he was still belittling people, and in fact outright killing civilians that stood in his way. So he was still not an innocent person. And then you get to the Cell Saga, and there were moments which could kind of redeem him or make him sympathetic, like just at the moment when he thinks he's the strongest, Android 18 comes along and breaks his arm, and also completely curb stomps him as well. Then when Trunks comes on and is also revealed to be a Super Saiyan, he starts to get a bit of an emotional complex, like, oh my god, now I am Super Saiyan, but yet everyone is stronger than me, why does this keep happening? But A, it's still more about his own ego and everything else, and B, all he has to do is train in the hyperbolic timetable, get stronger, and then suddenly, I'm back to cocky arsehole again. In fact, so much so that I am going to let Cell achieve his objective of absorbing / killing an innocent person so he can become perfect, so I can then beat him and prove that yes, I am still better than him. So when Cell does become perfect and kicks the ever-loving crap out of him, no one is sympathizing.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I'm sure someone's typing in the comments, but Jonin, what about that moment when Trunks died and then he went on a revenge rampage against Cell? What about it? I mean, yeah, it's good to know that he cared about Trunks because, well, he barely showed any kind of affection towards him. Like, he admitted that he was kind of proud of Trunks, but Trunks had to get into a fight with him and blast him into the ocean in order to get even the remotest a bit of respect from him.
Yeah, I knew about that much.
He gets, like, brief moments where he's kind of sympathetic, but then he always finds a way to quash it. And even in the Boo Saga, when he spends some time with a family, he has a wife and a son and is showing them some kind of affection, he reveals that he turned evil again because the plot required it, and he freely admitted that, yeah, I'm not possessed. I actually fully accepted this evil guy's power because midlife crisis. That's basically what it boiled down to. I woke up one morning and realized I was married and had a kid.
So basically, it's like a midlife crisis Cena, except that Shandigan Kwanto is evil.
Yeah.
What a phrase!
Yeah, and so, like, at the end of the series, he agrees to fight alongside with Goku and kind of, sort of, maybe, not really, gives up the whole rivalry of Goku and says, oh, okay, I'll fight, I'm supposed to go better. Like, Vegeta redeems himself a little bit, but not enough to make me actually like the character. Like, just enough that I'm willing to accept that he survives and is one of the good guys, as opposed to going, why aren't you killing this douche?
Yeah, it's nice that the series has finally reached a point where you can think that.
But this is the important point. The reason why he's at number 1 is because everything in DBZ is baby steps, but not enough as far as I'm concerned. Everything from Battle of Gods onwards, on the other hand, does redeem him. I already went over the full details in Battle of Gods, but seeing him actually show that, yes, he does care about his wife Bulma and is willing to go to any lengths to make sure that his family and friends, which he does accept them as friends now, the fact that he's going to go to any lengths to accept them actually earned a lot of goodwill from me. And thankfully, that continued into Resurrection F, which admittedly was a nothing event. I mean, it's literally Frieza becomes golden, Goku and Vegeta turn Super Saiyan Blue and kick his ass. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, power level 8 billion, wasn't it, Frieza?
Oh.
Because you're a cool dude?
Yeah, it's... Oh, God. I just discount power levels because they don't mean anything at this point, and essentially... Japanese people love their puns, and apparently the Japanese pun for 10 billion is a pun on nice guy, and someone at a convention asked Frieza's voice actor, hey, what's his power level? As if he would have any knowledge of that. So he essentially just made a jokey pun, which people started accepting as literal.
Wow, the Dragon Ball fan base is dumb.
Yeah.
Moving on from that.
Yeah. So, moving around... So, but yeah, after that non-event, we actually get into Dragon Ball Super and its original arcs after it's done retelling the first 2 movies, and I will freely admit, Dragon Ball Super has a lot of problems, namely due to a terrible production schedule and this weird insistence on making it a weekly production, so people were cranking out episodes every week in a manner similar to WWE, with just about the same level of consistency and writing quality. But there were good things that came out of it. There are characters like Hit, Kappa, and Caulifla, which I freaking love, and I would be happy to see them in any other Dragon Ball Z properties, and in fact, I actually consider it a shame that the movie coming up is focusing more on Broly rather than these guys, but whatever. But aside from them and some other really great plot points and character developments, one of the consistently good things about it is Vegeta. And the reason is that, kind of like as we mentioned with Sasuke, he essentially grows up. He freely accepts that, you know what, I have this family, I like it now, and I really do want to see them do well. He just becomes a straight-up good guy. Like, he still is cocky as hell, and still gets the badass one-liners and ruthless attitude when he fights, but he actually does go out of his way to be nice to people, and actually does stuff. In fact, I mentioned Kappa. One of the reasons I like him is because he and Vegeta develop this kind of strange master and student relationship where he teaches Kappa how to go Super Saiyan. And when Kappa says, okay, Master, I'm going to train and one day be like you, he very grumpily but very simply says,
set your sights higher.
Oh, wow. I like that.
Honestly, I could go on, but if I mentioned every single great moment Vegeta has in Super, we would be here all day. But yeah, the long and short of it is, not only does he get some of the coolest badass moments, which you no longer have to put the asterisk of, it's cool, but it did come from a dick. He continuously being put in new situations, and he's showing new sides of himself and evolving. Like, it's a comedy moment, but it's also one of my favorites in the fact that, when his daughter, the second child, Bulla, is eventually born in the series, this is actually like really sweet moment, but it shows how much they've grown, where Well, first off, part of the reason why in the Tournament of Power there's a question mark over whether or not he'll actually join is that, unlike Goku, he's actually... Like, Goku's pestering him to do all the normal stuff, like, hey, I'm gonna train, do you want to come? I know it's what you're into. Vegeta says, Goku, my wife's pregnant. I'm not leaving, not this time. I am gonna be a decent father this time and stay with her. Which, considering that this is the guy who barely realized he had a son and didn't give a shit about said son for the longest time, is really an improvement in itself. But when the child is finally born, there's this like sweet moment where everyone's at the gathering where they've come to see the baby chatting and talking cheerfully, but Vegeta's being the bad dude, like sitting a good distance away from them, arms crossed. And then people come up and see the baby. Yamcha and Mr. Satan, or Hercule, whatever you want to call him, pick up Bulla, who ends up crying, and then Vegeta, hearing the baby crying, instantly goes Super Saiyan Blue. Like, he just goes into full-on attack mode, which, just to kind of show from a distance, yeah, I'm over here, but don't you dare make my daughter cry or I will end you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's no, like, big emotional... impactful moments outside of stuff like DBZ, but the fact that he consistently gets these great moments where he's showing off more sides to him and really making him a more engaging character and actually making sometimes more compelling to watch than Goku, because don't get me wrong, Goku is a fun character and has his own complexities, but more often than not, Vegeta's the one that's actually more invested in what's going on in the plot, since unlike Goku, who more often than not wants to fight and protect his friends in a kind of abstract sense, in that, yeah, I don't want you to destroy the world, Vegeta is the one who actually has a family and is obsessed with protecting them at any cost, which is a big character growth and honestly just something that's a lot more relatable and personal, especially when you get older. So, yeah, for all of those reasons, for all of the continuously awesome scenes that he keeps getting throughout Super, where he goes from a complete dick into possibly one of the most badass family men I've ever seen, that's why I've put Vegeta in the number one spot.
Just goes to show you, if you want to earn sympathy, become a loving family man. Worked for Guile.
Indeed.
And Travis Willingham.
Who also plays Guile, funnily enough.
Oh my god, that's true. Now he's a family man! And on that note, I'm going to shuffle us on to number one for me, because really I gotta think of something to match that, but I think I have a good secret weapon. I mentioned upbringing being a huge part of Jill's character development at number 3, and my number one sort of plays on that, except more as a facet of what can be inflicted upon a person to change them at a young age than just simple surroundings, more or less. Number one, Sven. From Avatar: The Last Airbender is Zuko. Perhaps the most famous face turn in the last 13 years of media. Most people know the story of Zuko at this point. The once honor-obsessed teenage villain, in fact, of the first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, who spends a full season and then off and on through the second season fighting so desperately to earn back the respect of a father who does not deserve it. Someone who permanently disfigured Zuko for shaming the Fire Nation during, I believe it was a meeting.
Yeah, it was basically a military briefing where someone was suggesting sacrificing soldiers, and Zuko protested against it, saying they're good soldiers, they shouldn't be treated as sacrifices. And he fights in a duel. He thinks he's taking on the general who suggested it, but in fact he's taking on his father because his father's annoyed that he spoke out of turn.
So essentially, Zuko is a young man whose upbringing completely screwed him up, and essentially hammered in the idea that honor is everything, one must always stick by their family even if they are hideously wrong and basically personally destroy you. It fuels his character nuances through the first season, where, for the most part, he's actually sort of a joke, for the first half of it at least. And then things get serious, he becomes more nuanced, especially compared to his counterpart General Zoe, who is an asshole masterfully played by Jason Isaacs, the king of playing assholes. And then Season 2 comes around, which, honestly, I remember almost nothing about except for Zuko. And the arc he goes through, living for a brief period incognito with his uncle, and realizing that there's more to life than his family. His tremendously screwed up family. Everyone knows the ins and outs of his turn by this point, except for the few people who don't know at least something about Avatar: The Last Airbender, but it's so tremendously nuanced and believable, because, well, frankly, I don't want to get into how I know this. I'll just leave it at saying that it was nothing that happened to me, but parental abuse has a way of doing that. You end up sticking with them despite everything, and despite knowing that you shouldn't. And Zuko goes back and forth so many times because of that, that on the surface you're like, come on, make a choice. Family or decency. But really, especially looking through an adult lens, you understand the position he's in, because Zuko has been raised to accept the awfulness of his family and expect that he should be loyal to them, which causes a conflict that prompts him to switch sides and go back and forth between allegiances more than once. Which normally would be frustrating, but you get it, because the sad fact is, Zuko is damaged goods, and a turn for someone like him is not going to happen overnight. It's just not.
Indeed. And then I remember the whole, I think it was season 2 or season 3, I forget, but that big one when they're in a battle with Azula and Katara, he's forced to make a choice, and then he decides to help Azula. That was one that divided fans a lot, but then the next season, he did start to develop back into a good guy, and yeah, it's always a struggle. In fact, one of the lines that's always going to be remembered for that term is,
"Hello, Zuko here."
Oh man, his whole speech to himself. See, that's the thing. You can't fault him for having such difficulty choosing a side, because it's... family loyalty has been literally hammered into him. It has been disfigured into him. So the fact that he sides with Azula, and only after realizing the impact of turning on his uncle to do so actually makes his proper turn. With another character, it might feel less organic, but given Zuko's past, it doesn't. And the great decision they made with Zuko was to make him endearing the entire way through. Like in Season 1, he's a joke, and you sort of sympathize with him because of that. In Season 2, he's sympathetic throughout because you're seeing the human Zuko rather than the military commander, and in Season 3, he's a hero. So throughout, you have reason to believe that even when he makes bad decisions, he's a good person. And that's sort of crucial, because if you can't believe the humanity in someone before it happens, a turn can fall right on its face. When I describe that, I'm thinking of Oliver from Fire Emblem 10.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, that's pretty much hit the nail on the head. That's why it took me so long to like Vegeta. The fact that took until Super so that I could finally see the humanity in him. I mean, yeah, I know it's technically an alien, but you get what I mean. You could finally see the humanity in him, and I think that's the key to a good face turn, is leaving the seeds in there so that it doesn't just come out of nowhere and feel utterly insane.
Yeah, it's a matter of just basically believing that a person has good in them. It's the crux of Zuko's turn, and why it's such an emotional roller coaster watching him go through his ups and downs. And it's really amazing to me that he goes through all of those and never really loses any sympathy. Because you get him. You understand why he's torn. You understand that his family has tremendously screwed him up. And really, even at its saddest and most depressing, Season 2, Zuko's character arc is just a writing masterclass. The sort of character development to which I, as but a young bean of a writer, aspire. It's the most memorable part to me of the first half of the Avatar series. I feel like it's a little sad that I remember more about Legend of Korra and appreciate more about Legend of Korra, but honestly, even with my renewed love for that series post-Season 3, they never did anything quite like they did with Zuko. It was just singular.
Yeah, he was definitely a big moment. It's just like a masterclass of very subtle characterization. Like, someone you could always sympathize with him for the baggage he was carrying, or the fact that nothing ever came easy to him. He's always struggling to earn whatever he can, and yeah, like you said, he was definitely one of the most memorable, strongest parts of Avatar.
And really, the thing that I do remember most, and probably always will remember most about Avatar, a young man who, because of hideous abuse, made bad decisions and then still came around at the end and became something better than the people who came before him. And again, it's a message to live by, which I think is sort of the sum of a lot of these turns. Like, even if you make bad decisions, for the most part, unless you're a raging sociopath or, a Republican, it's never too late. You can go back and learn from what you've done. And honestly, that means a lot, especially to me, because I admit I've never conquered a country, but I've made mistakes in my life, and I've hammered the living out of myself because of them. And really keeping in mind that your mistakes don't have to define you has been crucial to me. Which is why I sort of proposed this list in the first place, and why Zuko is so memorable to me. Because his mistakes did not define him. What he made of them defined him.
Yep.
And that is my 18 tons of sap done, I think.
Yep, but I think it's the perfect way to end this countdown. You've summed it up rather eloquently there.
Sometimes I can do that. Most of the time, though, I'm just a meme.
Oh, geez. So, and on that note, we have one final section to close it off. Not quickfire reviews this time. Honestly, the only thing I can recommend at the time of recording is the Splatoon 2 Octo expansion, and, well, if you're already playing Splatoon 2, you probably know why it's good anyway, so...
Yeah, so, in lieu of that, I once again present one of my own creations.
Straight shooting.
The section in which we discuss wrestling news on a more regular basis than Flip the Mic. Don't worry, dude, I understand.
Sigh.
So, this week in wrestling. Wow, we've had a hell of a year in wrestling this week, haven't we? Roman Reigns.
Yeah, just to give context, we're recording this in the same week it was revealed that Roman Reigns came out, booed, like always, because, well, he's the guy they decided to push as the protagonist front and center, even though the guy wasn't ready for it, and there were plenty of other people on the roster who could have had his position, and they were pretty much pushing him into this Gary Stew of a wrestler who is superpowered and no one can beat. Then the guy comes out and says, "Hi, my real name is Joe, and I've been dealing with leukemia for over 11 years, and now it's come back."
Yeah. I mean, I have faith, because let's be honest, Roman Reigns is like the pinnacle of the human condition. Just look at that guy. But even then, cancer recurrences are scary motherfuckers. So, needless to say, even though I have bitched incessantly about Roman Reigns, to Joe Anawahi, of course, I wish nothing but the best. I have faith that you will kick out at 2, spear it into oblivion, and come back in due time.
Indeed, we definitely wish all the best, and oh man, it was a rough week for everyone, especially the wrestlers, because you know the reactions of Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose when they came out and hugged Roman and were crying? That wasn't in character. Literally no one, apart from Vince McMahon and some of the higher-ups, knew what Roman was going to announce. Some people were told that Roman's out, but they thought it was injury, it wasn't this.
That's the terrifying thing about it. You never know when something like this is going to happen. It can happen at any time, to anyone. And that was one hell of a reality check on Raw. And honestly, I think the best summary was given by Daniel Bryan, who said he has never in his life seen the air sucked out of the WWE locker room so quickly.
Yeah, and oh man, if you weren't crying when that was revealed, WWE's YouTube channel played an exclusive video where Roman Reigns is walking through the locker room afterwards, and everyone's out of character, but dear God, just seeing all of the individual wrestlers coming up to hug Roman, like Paul Heyman telling him, "You're not alone," Nia Jax just desperately hugging him, and then Braun Strowman in the most soft-spoken voice I've ever heard him going, so just telling him, "Okay, brother, you need anything, I'm willing to help," you know that?
Yeah, like, it was such a moment of humanity, because it's easy to forget that these people are in fact playing characters, and that their actual personalities and interpersonal dynamics are completely different. It's sad, but it took me till this week to realize that behind the scenes, Roman and Braun are best friends.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, it was one of those big moments. It felt like it had the gravity of Edge and Daniel Bryan retiring, even though I have faith it's not going to be one. It just felt like one of those moments. It's something you will not forget anytime soon.
I mean, you always heard this line about Roman Reigns is a really great guy behind the locker room. It's one of those things like, you sort of go, oh, yeah, I'm sure they're all saying that. But no, you do see that video, you do get the perfect picture that, yeah, despite him playing a character you couldn't get behind, you see why everyone in the locker room just freaking loved the guy. And honestly, if I may say one bit, part of what made me cry was actually seeing the unedited version that wasn't on YouTube, because there was a line where Joe said, "It didn't matter whether you cheered me or booed me, you reacted to me, and that's the best I could possibly hope for." That was when the entire audience started chanting, "Thank you, Roman." And you can actually see Joe start to cry. Like, he's actively, like, holding back tears at that point. Because that is the first time, I think, that the WWE Universe unanimously were all cheering for Roman and saying, "Thank you for everything you've done." And if there is anything I think WWE should take away from this, because it is a really bad thing, and I do hope Joe are the best of luck. But the thing I want the WWE to take away from this is that was the first time Roman got unanimously positive cheers from the crowd. And you did that to him. Because he was pushed for 5 years with you sticking your head up the sand and ignoring any kind of negative reaction that came your way out of sheer stubbornness. And it took cancer for the guy to get a serious cheer. And I see you making the same mistake with Charlotte Flair right now, who is getting booed, not because of her own fault, but because you decided to turn a likable person into a villain for no reason other than she has an Irish accent and you don't think that makes good company star material. And I'm just thinking, please do not make this same mistake again with another wrestler. Please. It shouldn't take cancer for people to acknowledge a wrestler's career, you know?
Yeah, and it really does say a lot about the atrociousness of their booking, that they virtually ruined a guy's career by pushing him so haphazardly. He has in-company success, but nobody likes him. So what kind of success is that? Before this, I would have said he's not going to be remembered well. Everyone's going to regard him as like Kevin Nash, the guy that did not deserve the push he got. You ruined his image because you could not pull your head out of your butt. So really, this does boil down to, we have nothing and have never had nothing against Roman, even whenever we say that he plays a better heel. That's something that I would say of The Miz, of The Rock. That's something that I would say of, actually, Becky Lynch. Just because we say that, it's not a reflection on the person, because Miz, Rock, Becky Lynch, everyone loves them behind the scenes. This whole backlash against Roman Reigns, for the most part, unless you're one of those insane fans, has nothing to do with the man himself. It has to do with a company who is ruining someone's image because they can't find it in themselves to do things more intelligently. And that's just sad.
And yeah, we're gonna have to hope they make positive changes. In fact, they're gonna have to do positive changes because they've essentially built the company around Roman for about 5 years, and now he's gone. So they're gonna have to find someone to either fill that role or start producing multiple stars so there's no vacuum anytime someone has an injury.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's like in 2008 when John Cena was legitimately injured, and suddenly they were put in this position of actually having to put effort into things. Like, you don't realize how big a vacuum a person will leave a place until they leave unexpectedly, and the company has to book around that.
Yeah, so I don't know who they're gonna put in the big role. Some people have said Seth, who will be a good choice. He's incredibly popular right now. Some people have said Braun. I don't think that's a good choice, personally, just because he's been booked as this big, larger-than-life character, which is kind of hard to make a heroic figure around, so...
Yeah, I mean, I at least hope they give the Universal title to Braun this time coming up, because the alternative is Brock. No. And I think, if nothing else, Braun deserves a shot.
Oh, screw you, Vince. Screw you, and Crown Jewel.
I don't know. I want the big guy to be Seth, because right now he is the grand king of baby faces for obvious reasons. Those obvious reasons being his talent and this last episode of Raw. And I would like to see a temporary Braun Strowman run followed by Seth Rollins, because it feels like those two both at least deserve one shot while Roman's out of the picture.
Some people are suggesting NXT call-ups, which I can definitely see happening. There are some good, promising stars in that division right now. And I've seen David Meltzer suggest that maybe Drew McIntyre, which I definitely see where people are coming from. He has a good physique, he has a great moveset, he is a great worker, and he can cut a decent promo, but it's never going to happen because Vince is shallow and Scottish.
Yeah. So unless Vince retires before WrestleMania 35, I don't see that happening. Maybe Intercontinental title, though, because Drew is Intercontinental.
That is true. And, I mean, like I said, nothing wrong with the guy or the Scottish people. He's great, but Vince really is that shallow.
Yeah, he's a man permanently continuum locked in the 80s.
Why do you think Asuka and Shinsuke Nakamura are treated as comedy agents? But anyway...
Yeah, so... not a great week. Oh yeah, and Dean Ambrose turned heel, turning Seth even more babyface. Oh, Aleister Black has returned. I'm not sure if I said this on the last Monkey broadcast recording, but first of all, I'm glad he's back, and second of all, I admit to taking probably inappropriate humor from the fact that the Holy Trinity has been completed. Alicia Fox broke her ass, Charlotte Flair broke her boob, and Aleister Black broke his ball.
And on that glorious note...
Oh, and it's WWE Evolution tonight, which is going to date the show horribly, but I'll maybe record further reactions after the fact, especially to the rumor that apparently Vince McMahon himself, old stubbornness personified, reached out to AJ Lee, CM Punk's wife, to make an appearance.
Oh, dear God.
If she does, first of all, pigs will be flying tonight. And second of all, I wouldn't be opposed to that because AJ is awesome. I just have a problem with the tool she's married to.
Sven didn't get the opportunity to record any reactions, but I'm inserting this here because in the original recording, I went into a rant about how the marketing and promotion for Evolution seemed to give the impression that WWE didn't care about their historic all-women's pay-per-view, and were just shoving it out the door so they could focus on the Saudi Arabia-based Crown Jewel show. But I was proved wrong. There were loads of great matches, creative booking, and, well, frankly, compared to the controversial Crown Jewel and the baffling Survivor Series that happened within the same 2 months, this was the best show of the lot. Especially the last women standing match between Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. And for those of you wondering why we were complaining about Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair earlier, And that was because we recorded it before this match, which turned Becky Lynch from a supposed villain to, if not a protagonist, then at least an anti-hero, while Charlotte Flair was starting to embrace more of her villainous/anti-hero natures as well, and both of them became a lot more entertaining because of it. So, yeah, things are still rough right now. In fact, to be honest, Raw has been absolutely crap the past few weeks, but the SmackDown Women's Division, or at least the Women's Championship matches, are really strong right now.
Long story short, yeah, bad week. Roman, everything going down with Saudi Arabia except worse, and Johnny Gargano being heel and apparently going through his edgelord phase.
Well, even though things aren't looking great in WWE right now, we can hope that this opportunity for change does bring about some good things. And likewise, we can only hope for good things next year, because that brings us to an end of both this Monkey broadcast and indeed this season. So, until next year, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. Remember, your mistakes don't define you. The purple shorts of your past cannot haunt you if you don't let them.
Hello and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review discussion show. I just stopped myself from saying written by the Jonin Monkey, which is kind of ridiculous because that implies we have any form of script.
Oh yeah, that implies that we have planning. Oh god. I choked on literally nothing there.
Occasionally my brother comes to visit and there's this kind of strange unspoken tradition where we either apparently kill Sven.
Something fell off my desk randomly. Carry on.
This is less of a blooper and more a moment I want to preserve. I'm currently recording corrections to an episode, but at the same time, I have a puppy that I'm looking after sitting on my lap. Oh, she gave it a good one. Damn it, this is distracting. Indeed, and we're not stopping there because we've got a big RPG to review, so let's move on to the next section, which is reviews! And now we're doing a time warp again, and this is February's one. Oh, the insanities of editing. Future me, I'm so sorry. But then again, you brought this on yourself. Anyway.
Omae Shinderu.
Maybe not the sirens, guys. Maybe just, mild talk. That'll do. That joke will work when I have sound effects in. This is the section where the two of us review something we've read, watched, or played, and that's it. But now, it's time for us to move on to the next section, which is reviews! Oh, god damn it. Let's try that again. Reviews!
No
there we
this
go.
Time. I say as it happens.
It's fine. There was enough space. We can edit that out. You know what? That was so bizarre. I almost said that concludes this session WWE. I don't know why.
I mean, it does seem like something that can come out of the New Day book.
That was Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel that you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright has been misused, get in touch with me and I'll try and correct it as soon as possible. All music belongs to its original users, and this year's ending theme was A World in Motion by Dusk, a cover of Sonic Boom. Thank you to all of our listeners. I hope you've enjoyed this year, and we'll be back in January. Until then, have fun, kids.